My daughter smiled as she handed me coffee at Istanbul airport. Drink this, Mom. 3 hours later, I woke, drugged, robbed, abandoned. A stranger's voice cut through my panic. She sold you, but I bought you first. Come with me. Don't miss a single beat of this story. Subscribe, like, share with someone who loves gripping stories, and drop your thoughts below. My 10 p.m. stories, one story every night at 10 p.m. This is about the moment when your own child looks you in the eye, smiles coldly, and walks away, leaving you stranded in a foreign country with nothing. I'm Elena Marsh. I'm 68 years old, and I spent 40 years being the kind of mother who sacrificed everything. But on a cold November evening in Istanbul, my daughter taught me that some people see sacrifice as weakness. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about survival, dignity, and revenge. The fluorescent lights of Ataturk International Airport burnt my eyes as I stood at the check-in counter, my fingers trembling around the handle of my small carry-on. The air conditioning made goosebumps rise on my arms beneath my wrinkled beige cardigan. Around me, travelers rushed past, speaking Turkish, Arabic, and German, languages I couldn't understand. The scent of strong coffee mixed with expensive perfume made my empty stomach twist. My daughter Victoria stood beside me, her blonde hair swept into a perfect ponytail, her designer handbag clutched against her chest like armor. She wore that expression I'd come to know so well over the past decade, the one that said I was an inconvenience she was barely tolerating. "Can I change my seat to a window?" I asked the airline clerk softly, trying to smile. It was such a small request. I'd saved my pension for 2 years to afford this trip to Turkey, a dream I'd held since I was young. I just wanted to see the sunset over the Bosporus, to remind myself that the world was bigger than the walls of my small apartment in Ohio. Victoria's hand shot out, gripping my wrist hard enough to leave marks. "Are you serious right now?" Her voice was low, venomous. "I paid for this entire trick, and you're already making demands?" The clerk looked uncomfortable, glancing between us. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "I'm sorry, You just thought you could take advantage of me like you always do." Victoria leaned closer, her breath hot against my ear. "You're pathetic. You've always been pathetic. Do you know Dad left because he couldn't stand another day trapped with your mediocrity?" My heart clenched. My husband, Richard, had died 23 years ago in a car accident, and Victoria had been using his death as a weapon against me ever since, as if his absence was somehow my fault, as if I'd driven him away instead of loving him desperately until the end. Before I could respond, Victoria yanked my brown leather purse from my shoulder, the last gift my mother had given me before she died. "Victoria, my documents!" I called out, my voice cracking. She didn't look back. She just walked towards security, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her hair catching the light like she was in a shampoo commercial. And I realized, with growing horror, that she wasn't stopping. I stood there, frozen, watching my daughter disappear through the security checkpoint without a single backward glance. My boarding pass was in my hand, but it was useless. All my identification, my credit cards, my phone, everything was in that purse she'd taken. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She'd planned this. The argument hadn't been spontaneous. She'd orchestrated it, waited for the perfect moment to take everything, and left me stranded. This wasn't just anger or a moment of cruelty. This was calculated abandonment. My knees buckled slightly, and I gripped the edge of the check-in counter to steady myself. The clerk asked me something in Turkish, then switched to broken English. "Madam, you okay?" "My daughter," I managed to say. "She took my passport, my wallet, everything." The clerk's expression shifted from concern to suspicion. She picked up a phone, speaking rapidly in Turkish. Within minutes, 2 security guards approached me, both young men with stern faces and uniforms that made my chest tighten with panic. I tried to explain in my limited English, my hands shaking as I gestured toward where Victoria had disappeared. But the more I talked, the more confused and suspicious they looked. One of them spoke into his radio, and I heard the word police. Terror washed over me in waves. I was 68 years old, alone in Turkey with no identification, no money, and no way to prove who I was or why I was here. For all they knew, I could be anyone, a criminal, a con artist, someone trying to slip through security with a false story. The taller guard gestured for me to follow him to a small office. My blood pressure was climbing. I could feel the familiar tingling in my fingertips, the tightness in my chest. I was on the edge of a panic attack, or worse, and there was nobody to help me, nobody who even knew where I was. That's when I felt someone step beside me, and a calm voice spoke in perfect English. "Excuse me, officers, there's been a misunderstanding." I turned to see a man in his early 70s, tall and distinguished, with silver hair combed back from a weathered face. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my pension, and his amber eyes held a mixture of authority and unexpected kindness. A thin scar traced above his left eyebrow, the only imperfection in an otherwise polished appearance. He spoke to the guards in Turkish, his tone commanding but respectful. They responded immediately, their postures shifting from aggressive to deferential. Whatever he was saying, it was working. One of them nodded, made a note on his clipboard, and stepped back. The amber-eyed man turned to me, and his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Listen carefully. Pretend to be my wife. My driver is arriving in 2 minutes. If you want to get out of this airport safely, take my hand right now and don't ask questions." Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was insane. I didn't know this man. I was in a foreign country. This could be a trafficking scheme, a robbery, or something worse. But I looked at the guards, then at the vast terminal stretching endlessly in all directions, and I thought about Victoria's cold smile as she'd walked away with everything I owned. I had spent my entire life waiting for others to save me. My husband, my daughter, people who were supposed to love me. They'd all abandoned me in different ways. Maybe it was time to take a stranger's hand and find out who I could be when I had nothing left to lose. I gripped his hand. His skin was warm, his hold steady. "Help me," I whispered. He nodded once, then spoke again to the guards in Turkish, gesturing to me with what looked like affectionate exasperation, the universal language of a husband dealing with his forgetful wife. One guard actually smiled, the other waved us through. As we walked toward the exit, the man leaned close. "My name is Dmitri Volkov. I'm 72. Russian by birth, but I've lived 20 years in London. I own companies in Istanbul, Moscow, and New York." His voice was measured and calm. "Your daughter will regret leaving you here. I promise you that." The automatic doors opened, and a sleek, black BMW pulled up to the curb. Not ostentatious, but clearly expensive. A driver in a dark suit and white gloves stepped out and opened the rear door without a word. "Get in," Dmitri said gently, and because I had no other choice, because the cold November wind was cutting through my thin cardigan, because everything I'd ever known had just collapsed in the span of 15 minutes, I climbed into the car of a complete stranger and watched the airport lights fade behind us. The BMW's interior smelled of leather and sandalwood. The seats were so soft I sank into them, and for the first time in what felt like hours, I could breathe without feeling like my chest was being crushed. Dmitri sat beside me, his posture relaxed, his hands folded calmly in his lap. "Take a breath," he said without looking at me. "I know this seems insane, but you're safe now." "Why are you helping me?" My voice came out hoarse and strained. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." He turned toward me, and in the dim light of the car's interior, I saw the deep lines around his eyes, the weariness of someone who'd carried too much loss for too long. "I saw what your daughter did. I saw her take your bag and smile. I watched her walk away without looking back." He paused. My son has the same smile when he's trying to destroy me. I recognize that particular brand of cruelty. So you help strangers because your son hurts you? I help people who've been discarded by the ones who should love them most. He adjusted his cuff. An elegant gold cufflink caught the passing streetlights. But I need something in return. Nothing immoral, nothing you'd be ashamed of, just a performance. I almost laughed, but the seriousness in his face stopped me. What kind of performance? I have a business meeting tomorrow. Very conservative investors from Saudi Arabia and Qatar, men who don't trust widowers. They think we're unstable, too emotional, and prone to reckless decisions. He looked directly at me. My wife died 9 months ago, cancer. Without her beside me at these meetings, I lose credibility. I've already lost 2 major deals because they question my judgment. You want me to pretend to be your wife. It wasn't a question. For a few days, maybe a week, you'll stay in my home, separate quarters, completely respectful. You'll attend 1 or 2 dinners with me, smile and act comfortable. Show them I have stability, that I'm not some grief-stricken old man about to make desperate choices. He straightened. In return, I'll provide you with shelter, food, and a phone so you can contact anyone you need. And when it's over, you'll receive $15,000. $15,000. That was 5 months of my pension, more money than I'd seen in years. I studied his face, searching for deception, for danger. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, he said simply. But ask yourself, do you have another option? If I wanted to harm you, would I be negotiating terms? Would I be offering you money and safety? He leaned forward slightly. I could take you anywhere right now, but I'm being honest because I think we can help each other. You need protection and resources. I need credibility and the appearance of stability. The car turned onto a bridge, and through the window I saw Istanbul stretching before us, the Bosporus glittering with reflected lights, mosques and towers piercing the night sky, a city that felt both ancient and alive. It was nothing like the small Ohio town where I'd spent 40 years shrinking myself to fit into other people's expectations. Maybe that was exactly what I needed, to be somewhere completely unfamiliar, where nobody knew the old Elena who apologized for existing. I have one condition, I heard myself say. Dmitri raised an eyebrow. Which is, I need help finding out what else my daughter has done. She didn't just abandon me here. I think this was part of something bigger. And when I know the truth, I swallowed hard. You help me make sure she never does this to anyone else. Dmitri extended his hand. We have a deal, Elena. I took it, and in that moment, everything changed. Dmitri's home was on the Asian side of Istanbul, in a neighborhood called Çengelköy, where old Ottoman houses lined steep cobblestone streets overlooking the Bosporus. Jasmine vines climbed the walls, their scent mixing with salt air from the water. Small lights embedded in the garden path created a warm glow, leading to an entrance framed by carved wooden doors that looked centuries old. It was beautiful in a way that felt lived in, rather than showy wealth, that whispered instead of shouted. A woman in her mid-40s met us at the door. She wore a simple black dress and a warm smile, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Mrs. Elena, she said in accented English, I'm Eileen. I manage the house. Your room is prepared. You must be exhausted. Exhausted didn't begin to cover it. I felt like I'd aged 10 years in the past 3 hours. Eileen led me up a marble staircase to the 2nd floor, down a hallway lined with photographs, mostly of an elegant woman with kind eyes and silver hair, Dmitri's late wife, I assumed. My room was larger than my entire apartment back home. Tall windows overlooked the Bosporus, where ferries moved like illuminated toys across dark water. The bed was covered in crisp white linens, and there was a bathroom with a deep soaking tub and heated floors. A silk robe and slippers waited on a chair. Mrs. Elena, Eileen said gently, Mr. Volkov said you would need clothes. Tomorrow I will take you shopping. For tonight, there is tea and food whenever you wish. Just press this button. She indicated a small panel by the bed. Rest, Mrs. Elena. You are safe here. After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed myself to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere I'd kept locked for decades. I cried for myself, for the mother I'd been, and for the daughter who hated me enough to leave me stranded in a foreign country. I cried because I was terrified and relieved and angry all at once. Eventually, the tears stopped. I washed my face in the marble bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror. 68 years old, gray hair tangled, eyes red and swollen. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman who'd been discarded. But maybe, I thought, that woman could become someone else. Dmitri's home was on the Asian side of Istanbul, in a neighborhood called Çengelköy, where old Ottoman houses lined steep cobblestone streets overlooking the Bosporus. Jasmine vines climbed the walls, their scent mixing with salt air from the water. Small lights embedded in the garden path created a warm glow, leading to an entrance framed by carved wooden doors that looked centuries old. It was beautiful in a way that felt lived in, rather than showy wealth, that whispered instead of shouted. A woman in her mid-40s met us at the door. She wore a simple black dress and a warm smile, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Mrs. Elena," she said in accented English. "I'm Eileen. I manage the house. Your room is prepared. You must be exhausted." Exhausted didn't begin to cover it. I felt like I'd aged 10 years in the past 3 hours. Eileen led me up a marble staircase to the second floor, down a hallway lined with photographs, mostly of an elegant woman with kind eyes and silver hair, Dmitri's late wife, I assumed. My room was larger than my entire apartment back home. Tall windows overlooked the Bosporus, where ferries moved like illuminated toys across dark water. The bed was covered in crisp white linens, and there was a bathroom with a deep soaking tub and heated floors. A silk robe and slippers waited on a chair. "Mrs. Elena," Eileen said gently, "Mr. Volkov said you would need clothes. Tomorrow I will take you shopping. For tonight, there is tea and food whenever you wish. Just press this button." She indicated a small panel by the bed. "Rest, Mrs. Elena. You are safe here." After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed myself to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere I'd kept locked for decades. I cried for myself, for the mother I'd been, and for the daughter who hated me enough to leave me stranded in a foreign country. I cried because I was terrified and relieved and angry all at once. Eventually, the tears stopped. I washed my face in the marble bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror. 68 years old, gray hair tangled, eyes red and swollen. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman who'd been discarded. But maybe, I thought, that woman could become someone else. I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through gauze curtains and the sound of seagulls crying over the water. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then everything came rushing back. Victoria, the airport, Dmitri, this impossible situation I'd stumbled into. There was a soft knock on the door. Eileen entered with a tray, Turkish tea in a tulip-shaped glass, fresh bread, white cheese, olives, and sliced tomatoes. "Good morning, Mrs. Elena. Mr. Volkov asks if you will join him for breakfast in 1 hour. He has something important to discuss." After I ate and showered, I found clothes laid out on the bed. Simple but elegant, a navy dress and low heels that somehow fit perfectly. When I came downstairs, Dmitri was on the terrace overlooking the water, speaking rapidly in Russian on his phone. He ended the call when he saw me. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. "We need to talk before tonight's dinner." "Tonight?" My stomach dropped. "The investors arrive at 7, but first I need to give you this." He handed me a new phone, already set up with an international SIM card. "Call whoever you need to call, your sister, friends, anyone who should know you're safe." I stared at the phone like it was a lifeline. My sister, Eleanor, in Ohio. She must be worried sick. "Call her now. Take your time. I'll be in my office." My hands shook as I dialed Eleanor's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice frantic. "Elena? Oh my God, where are you? Victoria called yesterday. She said you disappeared at the airport, that she turned around and you were gone." Disappeared? The word came out sharper than I intended. "Eleanor, she's lying. She took my purse with all my documents and abandoned me. She planned it." Silence. Then Eleanor's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. I knew it. "Elena, I need to tell you something.
3 months ago, Victoria called me. She asked about the value of your house and said you were losing your mind, and she needed to protect the family assets. She wanted me to sign papers declaring you incompetent. The room tilted. Did you sign them? Of course not. I threw her out of my house. But Elena, Eleanor's voice cracked. She said something that terrified me. She said, Mom killed Dad, and she's going to pay for it if it takes me the rest of my life. I closed my eyes, feeling 23 years of guilt crash over me like a wave. Richard, the accident, the secret I'd kept to protect her. She really believes that, I whispered. What she believes doesn't matter, Eleanor said firmly. What matters is what she's done. Elena, you need to protect yourself. Get a lawyer, document everything. After we hung up, I sat there staring at the Bosporus, understanding finally dawning. This wasn't just about the airport. Victoria had been planning something for months, maybe years. The abandonment was just the beginning, and if I didn't fight back, she would take everything. My house, my savings, my dignity, maybe even my freedom. Dmitri returned to the terrace, took one look at my face, and poured me a glass of water. Bad news? Worse than I thought. I told him everything about Victoria's calls to Eleanor, about Richard's death, about the guilt I'd carried for 2 decades. When I finished, Dmitri was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a call, speaking in rapid Turkish. When he hung up, he said, My attorney will investigate. If your daughter has done anything illegal, forged documents, stolen assets, we'll find proof. But Elena, you need to understand something. If we find evidence of crimes, you'll have to decide whether to use it. Against my own daughter? Against someone who abandoned you in a foreign country and is trying to have you declared incompetent so she can steal everything you own. His voice was gentle but firm. There's a difference. I looked out at the glittering water, at the ferries carrying people to jobs and homes and lives, and I realized he was right. The old Elena would have accepted this, absorbed the pain and made excuses for Victoria's behavior, but Elena had died at the airport yesterday. The woman sitting here now wanted answers and justice, and maybe for the first time in her life, a little bit of revenge. Aylan took me shopping that afternoon in Nişantaşı, Istanbul's luxury district. We visited boutiques where the salespeople spoke 5 languages and brought champagne while you tried on clothes. I chose a burgundy silk dress, elegant but not showy, and a pair of pearl earrings that caught the light. When I looked at myself in the dressing room mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. This wasn't the frumpy mother Victoria had discarded. This was someone else, someone who looked like she belonged in Dimitri's world. The dinner was at a restaurant on the top floor of a hotel overlooking the Bosporus. We arrived in Dimitri's BMW, and he helped me out of the car with practiced ease, his hand resting lightly on my lower back. Protective, appropriate, exactly what a husband of 30 years might do. 3 men waited at the table, all Middle Eastern, all in their 60s, all wearing expensive suits and expressions of polite skepticism. Dmitri introduced me in English and Arabic, his hand never leaving my back. My wife, Elena, she's joining us tonight because she has experience in hospitality management, and I value her perspective on the hotel project.
One of the men, Ibrahim, with sharp eyes and a salt and pepper beard, studied me carefully. Mrs. Volkov, your husband says you worked in hotel operations. Tell me about your experience. This was the test, I realized. They wanted to see if I was real or just decoration. I took a slow breath and decided to answer with the truth. I spent 34 years in hotel management in the United States. I started as a front desk clerk and worked my way up to operations director at a 4-star property in Cleveland. When I left, our occupancy rate was 92%, and we'd held the Regional Excellence Award for 9 consecutive years. The table went quiet. Ibrahim set down his water glass. Why did you leave? I could have lied, could have invented something comfortable, but I looked at Dmitri and saw him nod almost imperceptibly, giving me permission to be honest. My husband died, I said simply.
I had a daughter to raise. When she grew up and didn't need me anymore, I realized I'd forgotten who I was beyond being a mother and a widow. So I retired early and disappeared from the world for a while. The silence stretched. Then the second man, Mahmoud, with laugh lines around his eyes, smiled. Honesty, rare in our business. The atmosphere shifted after that. They began discussing the hotel project, a chain of boutique properties across Turkey and the Eastern Mediterranean. Dmitri presented projections, and I found myself leaning forward, studying the numbers on his tablet with 30 years of industry knowledge suddenly awakening. When he paused, Ibrahim asked, "Does your wife agree with these projections?" Dmitri looked at me, surprised. I glanced at the numbers again: occupancy rates, seasonal projections, operational costs, and my old instincts kicked in. The Istanbul projections are aggressive, I said carefully, but you're underestimating the Antalya market. The numbers there are too conservative. There's untapped potential, especially if you target the European market in shoulder season. The third man, Farid, who'd been silent until now, leaned forward. Explain. For the next 20 minutes, I did. I talked about market analysis, booking patterns, and operational efficiency. I'd spent 3 decades doing this work, and suddenly it was all flooding back, the person I'd been before I'd let grief and motherhood consume my entire identity. When I finished, Ibrahim laughed, a deep, genuine sound. Dmitri, my friend, your wife understands this business better than half our consultants. We'll sign, but on one condition: she reviews the Antalya plan personally. 3 hours later, we left with signed contracts worth $380 million. I, the woman who'd been abandoned at an airport 36 hours ago, had just helped close one of the biggest deals of Dimitri's career. We returned to the villa near midnight. Eileen had left tea and small pastries in the sitting room. Dmitri poured 2 cups, and we sat by the windows overlooking the dark water, the adrenaline of the evening finally fading. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I shouldn't have interfered with your business presentation. I overstepped." He turned to me, and for the first time since I'd met him, he smiled, a real smile that made him look 10 years younger. "Interfered? Elena, you saved me. Ibrahim was testing whether you were genuine. You passed spectacularly." 30 years in hotels teaches you to spot problems in projections. That wasn't instinct, that was talent. He set down his cup, his expression turning serious. "I have a proposal, and it's not pretend." My stomach tightened. "What kind of proposal?" "Marry me. A real, legally binding contract for 6 months." He raised a hand to stop my protest. "Hear me out. You'll receive $750,000 deposited in a private account that no one can touch, not your daughter, not anyone. You'll work as a consultant on the hotel projects, earning $30,000 per month. My attorney will ensure complete legal protection for your assets in America. Why would you do this? Because my son, Alexei, is trying to have me declared incompetent, the same thing your daughter attempted. He's filed petitions claiming my grief has impaired my judgment. A legal marriage with a wife actively involved in my business will destroy that narrative completely." He paused. "And because I see in you what I haven't seen in anyone in years, someone who understands what it means to be discarded by the people who should love you most."
I stared at him. The offer was insane. It was also the most practical, strategic solution to both our problems. "After 6 months?" I asked. "We divorce amicably. You keep the money, the connections, and your independence. You can return to America or stay here. The choice is yours. But I promise you this: your daughter will never make you feel small again. You'll have real power, real freedom." I thought about Victoria, about the house I'd almost lost, and about spending my pension checking account every month to see if I could afford groceries. I thought about 34 years of expertise gathering dust while I apologized for taking up space in the world. "I have conditions," I said. "Name them." "First, your attorney doesn't just protect my assets. He investigates Victoria. If she's committed fraud or forgery, I want proof. I want enough evidence to stop her permanently if I have to. Done. Second, this is strictly business. Separate rooms, separate lives. We only appear together when necessary for your business or your legal situation. Mutual respect, nothing more. Agreed, completely. Third, I hesitated. If I ever become a burden, if I'm not pulling my weight, you let me go. I've spent my whole life being seen as a burden. I won't live that way again. Dmitri stood, walked to where I sat, and placed both hands gently on my shoulders. Elena Marsh, you are not a burden. You never were. Your daughter created that story to justify her cruelty. But I've watched you tonight. Intelligent, competent, strong. You're an asset, not a liability. His voice softened. I accept your conditions, but I have one of my own. You must promise to stop apologizing for existing. Tears filled my eyes, not from sadness, but from something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. We have a deal, I whispered. 4 days later, Dmitri and I signed papers at a government office in Istanbul's Beyoğlu district. The ceremony was clinical, witnessed by Eileen and Dmitri's attorney, a sharp-eyed Turkish man named Kemal. No flowers, no music, no romance. Just signatures on documents that gave me legal protection I'd never imagined possible. When we left the office as Mr. and Mrs. Volkov, I took a photo of the marriage certificate and sent Victoria a single text. I'm alive. I'm married. From now on, you have no power over me. I'll return to America when I decide to, not before. Her response came within seconds. Have you lost your mind? I smiled at my phone and typed back, maybe, but it's the best decision I've ever made. Then I blocked her number. The next 3 months were the most intense of my life. Dmitri hadn't been exaggerating when he said I'd actually work. By the second week, I was attending morning meetings with architects, reviewing site plans, and analyzing financial projections. At 68, my schedule was suddenly busier than it had been in my 30s. I flew to Antalya alone to meet with local partners, men who initially looked at me like I was decorative, until I started presenting my operational analysis. 15 minutes into my presentation, they were taking notes. 30 minutes in, they were asking detailed questions about seasonal staffing and revenue management. When I returned to Istanbul, Dmitri was waiting with non-alcoholic champagne and that rare smile. Ibrahim called. He said you have more strategic vision than consultants he pays $50,000 per report. He wants you to review the Bodrum project next. I took a sip of champagne and felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Pride. Not the kind that comes from making others happy, but the kind that comes from proving yourself capable. Meanwhile, Kemal's investigation into Victoria was producing results. He called me into his office one gray afternoon and handed me a folder so thick my hands shook holding it. Mrs. Volkov, we have enough evidence for criminal charges: forgery, fraud, attempted theft. Your daughter forged your signature on property documents, took out loans in your name, and attempted to sell your house without authorization. I read through the documents once, twice, 3 times. There it was, in black and white. Every crime, every lie, every betrayal meticulously documented. She could face prison, Kemal said quietly, between 2 and 5 years, depending on the charges. I closed the folder and looked out his office window at the Bosphorus glittering in weak sunlight. That was my daughter. The child I'd rocked to sleep, whose tears I'd dried, whose dreams I'd funded with money I didn't have. Keep the evidence, I said finally, but don't file charges yet. I need to go back to America first. I need to look her in the eye and give her one chance to make this right before I destroy her life the way she tried to destroy mine. Kemal nodded. You're more merciful than I would be. I'm not being merciful, I said. I'm being strategic. If I act now, people will say Dmitri manipulated me, that I'm emotional and irrational. But if I go back strong and independent, with my own resources and my own legal team, and she still chooses to fight, I looked at him directly. Then I'll show her exactly what her pathetic mother learned to do. 5 months into our arrangement, I received a call from Eleanor. Her voice was tense, frightened. Elena, Victoria's coming to Istanbul. She bought a ticket. She lands tomorrow. My blood ran cold. How does she know where I am? She's been stalking your social media. That photo you posted of the Bosphorus last week, she recognized the view and traced it to Changelkoy. Elena, she's not coming to reconcile. She's coming for a fight. I hung up and found Dmitri in his study. My daughter is coming here. He set down the document he'd been reading. When? Tomorrow. Then we prepare. He made several calls in rapid Turkish, then turned to me. Kamal will be here with all the evidence. Eileen will make sure the security cameras are recording. And Elena, his voice softened, whatever happens tomorrow, remember, you're not the powerless woman she left at the airport. You're not even the woman who got in my car 5 months ago. You're someone else now. He was right. I looked down at my hands, no longer shaking, no longer apologetic. These were hands that had reviewed million-dollar contracts, had shaken hands with investors across 3 countries, had built something real in the wreckage of my old life. Victoria arrived the next afternoon like a storm. She didn't knock, didn't call ahead. She followed a delivery person through the gate and marched up to the villa, her heels clicking on the stone path like gunshots. I was in the sitting room when I heard her voice, shrill, demanding, hateful. Where is she? Where's my mother? Eileen tried to stop her, but Victoria pushed past, and suddenly she was there, in the doorway. She looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, her clothes wrinkled, her perfect hair a mess. But it was her eyes that shocked me, the burning hatred that had clearly been festering for years. There you are, she spat, hiding in your billionaire's fortress while you destroy your own daughter's life. I stood slowly, smoothed my silk dress, and looked at her calmly. Victoria, you didn't call ahead. You could have knocked. Knocked? She laughed, a harsh sound. You disappear for 5 months, marry some stranger, and now you lecture me about manners? I expect basic respect, yes. She stepped closer, her finger pointing at my chest like a weapon. Respect? You want respect? You sold yourself to this old man, and now you think you can humiliate me, erase me? Dmitri appeared at the top of the stairs, his voice ice. Watch your words. You're in my home. Victoria's face twisted with contempt. So it's you, the con artist, who brainwashed my mother? Your mother is my legal wife, with full documentation and witnesses. You, on the other hand, committed fraud and abandonment. Would you like to discuss that in front of my attorney? My mother is 68, confused and obviously being manipulated. Your mother, I interrupted quietly, is standing right here, and she's not confused at all. Victoria spun to face me, and I saw her mask begin to crack. You don't know what you've done. You've ruined everything. I was trying to protect you. Protect me? I kept my voice level. You abandoned me at an airport in a foreign country with no passport, no money, and no way to call for help. You took everything I had and walked away smiling. To teach you a lesson, she shouted, to make you understand that you can't keep leeching off me, manipulating me. I manipulated you? The word came out sharper than I intended. Victoria, I sacrificed everything for you. Everything. Sacrificed? She laughed bitterly. You made me feel guilty for existing, guilty for needing things, guilty for surviving while Dad died running away from you. There it was, the poison she'd been carrying for 23 years. I felt Dmitri's presence behind me, steady and supportive. Your father didn't run from me, I said quietly. Don't lie. Victoria grabbed a decorative vase and hurled it against the wall. The crash echoed through the house. He left that night because of you, because of your nagging, your mediocrity, He left because he was drunk. The words came out flat, final. He'd been drinking all evening after learning his construction project had failed. He got in his car with a blood alcohol level 4 times the legal limit and drove 90 miles an hour into a concrete barrier. Victoria went pale. "No, Dad didn't drink like that. You're lying." The forensic report is archived, case number 87634. You can verify it yourself. I reached into the folder Kamal had prepared and pulled out a copy, handing it to her. "I hid the truth from you because you were 15 years old and you just lost your father. I couldn't tell you he died drunk, leaving me with $2.2 million in debt from his failed project." Victoria's hands trembled as she read the document. Her lips moved silently over the words: blood alcohol, 0.32, reckless driving, no mechanical failure. "The ranch I sold, my mother's land that you think I squandered, I sold it to pay your father's debts. Every penny of that $2.6 million went to contractors, suppliers, and investors he'd made promises to. I kept just enough for your education. The insurance was $80,000, barely covered the funeral. Your college tuition was $5,100 a month for 5 years. Who do you think paid the difference?" Victoria sank onto the sofa, the paper falling from her hands. "I didn't know. Because I never told you. Because I loved you more than my own pride. Because I thought one day you'd understand that sacrifice doesn't have to be spoken to be real." I stepped closer. "But you turned that sacrifice into a weapon. You made me into a villain so you could justify your cruelty." Kamal entered quietly and placed a second folder on the coffee table. "Mrs. Victoria, this contains evidence of your crimes: forged signatures on property documents, fraudulent loan applications using your mother's identity, attempted unauthorized sale of her home. We have testimony from the notary you bribed, bank records, and email correspondence with your husband planning to keep your mother out of the country while you liquidated her assets." She stared at the folder like it was a snake. You can't." "We can," Kamal said simply. "The charges carry a combined sentence of 4 to 8 years in prison. Your medical license will likely be suspended pending investigation." She looked at me, and for the first time in decades, I saw fear in her eyes instead of hatred. "You'd really destroy me? Your own daughter?" I sat down across from her, exhausted. "I don't want to destroy you, Victoria, but I also won't let you destroy me. So here's your choice. You repay every dollar you stole. You return or properly purchase my house at market value. You cancel the fraudulent loans. You make a public acknowledgement of what you did." I paused. "If you do all that, I won't press charges." "I don't have that kind of money." "Then you sell what you bought with mine. You sell what you bought. You take out loans. You refinance. You're a surgeon. You have an income. Pay it back over 5 years if you have to, but you pay it back. And if I do that," her voice was barely a whisper, "if you do that, our relationship ends. You'll be my daughter by blood only. No inheritance, no say in my life, no power over me ever again." Victoria sat there for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. These weren't manipulative tears. They were real, raw, the kind that come when your entire worldview shatters. "But you're my only mother," she said brokenly. "And I was once your only mother," I replied. "And you left me at an airport like trash. You tried to have me declared incompetent. You stole everything I had." I felt my own tears coming, but held them back. "I gave you 38 years of my life, Victoria. I gave you everything. And when I finally needed you, you threw me away." She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Part of me, the mother who'd lived for nearly 4 decades, wanted to go to her, to hold her, to make it better. But I stayed in my chair. "You have 72 hours to decide," Kamal said, gathering his documents. "After that, we proceed with charges." Victoria stood unsteadily. She looked around the elegant room, at Dmitri, at Eileen hovering in the doorway, and at me. "You've really changed," she said softly. "You're not the same person." "No," I agreed. "I'm not. The woman you abandoned died at that airport.
What survived had to learn how to live without your approval, your love, or your validation, and she discovered she didn't need any of those things to have value. Victoria walked to the door, then paused. Did you ever really love me, or was I just another obligation? The question was designed to hurt, to make me doubt myself. The old Elena would have fallen for it, would have spent hours agonizing over the answer. But the new Elena knew better. I loved you with everything I had. But love isn't enough when the person you love sees your sacrifice as weakness and your devotion as manipulation. I loved you, Victoria, past tense. Whether I still love you depends entirely on what you do in the next 72 hours. She left without another word. Victoria didn't call for 3 days. On the 4th day, Eleanor phoned. Elena, Victoria's attorney contacted me. She's agreed to the repayment terms. She's selling her vacation condo, taking out a structured loan, and she's already signed papers returning the house to your name. I sat down heavily, unsure whether I felt relief or grief. Did she say anything else? She said, Eleanor's voice cracked. She said she's sorry. She said she spent 23 years hating you for something that wasn't your fault, and she needs time to figure out who she is when she's not carrying that anger. 2 months later, I stood on the terrace of my apartment in Antalya, watching the Mediterranean sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. I'd bought the apartment with my own money, my salary from the hotel consulting work, not Dmitri's contract payment. Dmitri and I had quietly dissolved our marriage contract as planned, but we'd also formed a real partnership. I now owned 15% equity in the hotel company, earned through my contributions over 8 months. We still had dinner twice a week and still collaborated on projects, but we lived separately, independently. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Final payment transferred. Lawyer confirmed. It's done. Another text followed. I'm in therapy, 3 times a week. Dr. Morrison says I've been carrying trauma and guilt I didn't know how to process. That doesn't excuse what I did, but I'm trying to understand it, and myself. A third text. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to become someone you might one day want to know. I stared at the messages for a long time. Then I typed, I see your effort. That's all I can give you right now. Her response was immediate. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. I set down my phone and looked out at the sea. Forgiveness might never come, not fully, not completely, but watching someone genuinely try to change, that I could acknowledge. I thought about the woman I'd been 18 months ago, standing terrified in an Istanbul airport, believing her life was over. That woman would have forgiven Victoria immediately and would have absorbed the pain and made excuses, but that woman was gone. What remained was someone who'd learned that self-respect has limits, that love requires boundaries, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing to let go.
I'd started a foundation with part of Dimitri's payment, providing travel grants and job training for women over 60 who wanted to restart their lives. The first class had 12 students, women like me, who'd been discarded, diminished, and told they were too old to matter. Victoria donated anonymously, but I knew her handwriting on the note, for women who deserve second chances. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a beginning. Now, at 70, I split my time between Turkey and brief visits to Ohio. Dmitri remains a constant presence, not a husband, but a true friend. His son, Alexei, eventually apologized, and they're slowly rebuilding their relationship. As for me, I've learned that starting over doesn't mean erasing the past. It means choosing which pieces to carry and which to leave behind. I still think about Richard sometimes, not with guilt, but with understanding. I loved a flawed man who made terrible choices. Victoria and I text occasionally. She shares stories about her patients and her therapy insights. I don't always respond immediately, but I read every message. Full forgiveness may never come, but I can witness her genuine transformation. That I can witness. I keep one photo from that night in Istanbul. Dmitri at dinner with the investors, both of us smiling, both of us powerful.
It reminds me that when the ground disappears beneath you, you have two choices: fall or learn to fly. I chose to fly, and I've never looked back. Some betrayals teach you that family isn't always about blood. It's about who stays when you have nothing left to give. I learned that kindness needs boundaries, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and that sometimes the people who discard you give you the greatest gift, the freedom to become yourself. If this story touched you, stay with me for the next one. Subscribe, like, share it with someone who would feel it, and leave your thoughts in the comments. My 10 p.m. stories, one story every night at 10 p.m.